General Bantu Holomisa, the leader of the United Democratic Movement, the UDM, last month launched the party's manifesto in Midrand. During the launch, Holomisa highlighted that South Africa is currently in a crisis and that there is a significant gap between the people and their government. Now, the main reasons behind this disconnect, according to Holomisa, are the unacceptable levels of corruption, a weak economy, high unemployment rates, increasing crime, and dangerous lawlessness. Now, to unpack all of this, we're now joined in studio by UDM leader General Bantu Holomisa. General, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So it has been, a while since your manifesto launch, and I will come to, just some of the merits and some of the offerings that you are making to South Africans, or you had made. And your manifesto really captured at the heart of some of the concerns, of South Africans. And I want to speak to those. But we are 8 weeks, away from those elections. Holistically, when you look back to that manifesto launch, do you think it is enough to garner you those much needed numbers that you need, for those elections come 29th of May?
Thank you very much for inviting us to share some thoughts with you and our audience. Yes, the answer is a big yes, because we have been occupying the crease and betting on a wicket of promoting ethics of good governance, betting on a wicket of anti-corruption. And I think, if I may use the language of the cricket, we have hit 4s and 6s. We've got casualties in that route. As a result, I have no doubt in anybody's mind that the United Democratic Movement, what it has done to save South Africa, not talking about numbers, but the message and the quality of the programs we present to the nation. So launching the manifesto of the UDM was a continuation of what we have been doing. Like, for instance, our slogans say corruption destroys our freedom. It has done so because we have never expected that the liberators of yesteryear, from top to bottom, would today be embroiled into many, many scandals. But let the voters have the last word.
So some of the voters are concerned, that there is actually a disconnect from your hard-hitting stance, particularly in as far as corruption is concerned, because we have seen how this has also cost you at a personal price, But the disconnect and the problems come in that those hard-hitting stances, particularly what we've just said now, do not necessarily translate in the numbers. I mean, if we look back to 1999, where you had 14 members in Parliament making significant inroads, I would imagine, you're now sitting at 2. So the concern is, how impactful will you be in Parliament, when you are, post these elections?
Well, my sister, it's not about numbers, but it's the quality. If we tell you that we were 2 when we said the former chairperson of the IEC has to go for what she has done, she had to go. We were 2 when we said we need a secret ballot in this country. The Constitutional Court awarded us that. We were 2 when we said, let ESCOM make sure that the police stations, schools, as well as hospitals, are not affected by load shedding. We were 2 when we said the PIC monies are being looted left and right. We were 2 when we said the Speaker of the House needs to answer certain questions. So it's not about the numbers. So we have betted well. I think we have punched above our weight. Talk to those 268 MPs, if you want to, who would always put the interest of their party ahead of the country, and to the extent of even protecting a corrupt lot within their ranks. So I'm not worried about that.
So let's look at then, some of the offerings that you've made during your manifesto. You spoke significantly, of course, about corruption, about lawlessness, about crime, and about the ailing economy that we are currently facing. I want to touch a little bit on the factors of corruption. You talk about good governance, and you've actually listed some steps in terms of how you think you can turn what we are currently seeing in terms of malfeasance, in terms of corruption, by implementing good governance. How do you do that when, some of the cases that you've also mentioned, where you have people in very high positions that are not only implicated, but have seen themselves, at the back foot of the law. We are now looking at, for instance, the Speaker of Parliament facing serious allegations herself of corruption. And this is the person in terms of, just the level that is right there with the Deputy President of the country, as well as in the judiciary with the Chief Justice.
You are talking to someone who has been in the helm of a government before for 5.5 years. De facto, I was the head of government, although we got in there militarily. You know what we did? We said we are not going to introduce military courts to try the people who have stolen government resources or misused state resources. But we said the courts are going to be independent. The police are going to do their job as independent institution as well. Not to wait for a minister to say you can arrest so-and-so. The prosecuting authority was also given an independent status. So if we want to fix South Africa, we will have to say from day one that the courts under the Chief Justice must be given their budget and run their affairs. That the Public Service Commission must also do their work, instead of like currently, where you find that the powers of the Public Service Commission have been usurped by Luthuli House in terms of deploying whoever. Some of the chief directors and directors, even to the level of DGs currently, have never done even an induction course to run those departments. So that means, therefore, professionalization of public service will mean that people must do courses, must be trained. The police must do their work. So the criminal justice system in this country would have to be improved drastically. And where it is necessary in each institution, a skills auditing would be done. But everybody must stay in his or her line and do the work they are getting salary for or being paid for.
General, I want us to move to another one of your key objectives that you mentioned, during that launch. You spoke at length about the economy of this country, particularly touching on the unemployment rate in as far as youth is concerned. You obviously paint a picture that many South Africans are very familiar with. Just talk to us about some of the points that you will then introduce in as far as trying to redress what we are currently experiencing in the country.
Firstly, we have to analyze our economic system. And unfortunately, it cannot be done by one political party. We messed up during CODESA, we must accept that, because we never touched the issues related to the economy. I understand that after Chris Hani was assassinated, the leaders of the time tended to press panic buttons, and they only demanded the date for election and postponed the issues related to economy. And you cannot talk about economy and without mentioning the land-related matters and property. So what we need to do, so that we don't make a mistake, because one-party dominance, we have noted that even at this stage since 1994, the ANC has never had consensus on what kind of macroeconomic policy, even within its tripartite alliance. So there will be a need, therefore, to have an indaba to say, so far we've traveled so many years, 30 years, where can we tick these boxes where we think we've done well? Obviously, the issue of economy, everybody agrees that is faltering. The crime, you name them. So we still need that round table discussion to finish off the job we didn't finish. We started then, but we didn't finish. So for the youth of this country, we have to change the setup like the Afrikaners did during their time when they assumed power from the English, where they established, for instance, sector banks. If your child has studied for a special field, engineering, or even fashion design, when that individual wants to start a factory or to produce goods for sale, she's going to say to you, I don't have access to capital. Those sector banks, therefore, can help. We need to change this mentality that you are sending your child to school in order to get a job. Rather, let us change the psyche and say, we want to create our own wealth creators who are going to employ our own people. It's laughable that today 57 million black population is queuing to go and get jobs from the companies which are run by a mere 3 million white population. Even that 3 million population, not everyone there is having a business. So we need, therefore, to invest in our people.
Do you have your sights lined up, to partner with like-minded parties? I mean, I've heard a couple of political parties, in fact, not too long ago, along the same sentiments in terms of creating spaces where like-minded parties come together and unlock, those spaces that you speak of in terms of economic retribution, as well as, just upskilling and creating spaces for particularly those that have been marginalized for a very long time. So given the fact that you have mentioned that, and the fact that there is that realistic realization that we are heading into a coalition government, who do you have your sights on?
Well, firstly, we need to agree in principle that there is a need for a national dialogue. If it is going to be a national dialogue, that means it's going to be inclusive. Once you start grouping people along the certain ideologies, you are going to miss the point. Where here we need to apply a non-partisan approach in order to address the problems of South Africa. There are many of them. Unfortunately, most of them were created by the ruling party. So for coalitions, we are not fixated. We have no preconditions to say we cannot work with so-and-so or we will work with so-and-so. Because by nature, the nature of the coalitions, you cannot do that. I've traveled around the world. I've been to countries like Germany where you physically and witness that the Christians on the center or on the right would work wonderfully with the hardline socialists on the far left. So it makes no difference. Even here, I coordinated in 2016 the opposition parties which pushed the African National Congress out of the big metros. There you had Freedom Front Plus, you had EFF. Everybody agreed that these people have messed up our cities. They must go. It's going to be the same thing to say, if the voters are saying no more one-party dominance, what do we understand by that? Who should meet, who have made it possible that no one-party dominance? Obviously, we should be meeting firstly as those parties. If need be, if you want to have stability, we may even be forced to say, ANC, we want to establish a government of national unity. So you have good cadres there, which we would like to retain, but these other ones must go.
Let's turn our focus now on basic education. I mean, this is something that also is of critical importance in the country. If you will recall, even in the higher education space, there are a number of issues that have been raised. In fact, some saying that there is a crisis, particularly within the basic education system. So your manifesto then undertakes to also look at ways in which we could have a non-paying free education for many South Africans. How would you go about doing that?
Well, before you look into that, you know, in Transkei, we don't have gold mines, or Eastern Cape, let me put it that way. We never had gold mines in those areas. But the gold mine of Eastern Cape has always been education. I don't have to lecture you and the audience here. Even during the dark days, many people from the townships left these areas and went straight to Eastern Cape, in particular in Transkei, and studied there. So, but came the 1994 and the syllabus, instead of looking at what was working in South Africa, we tended to throw the baby with the dirty water with the baby and went to go and look for syllabus in the dustbins of New Zealand. And we have never recovered on that. We are still confused as to what kind of education system we should have. What I would suggest is that we need to meet as South Africans, the experts, and come up and with pillars of our education. Here, for instance, in 2021, I participated in the establishment of a project called Tutuka, wherein from 1998 up to 2021, we're supplying study guides of maths, accounting, and English to high schools, grade 9, 10, 11, 12. The aim was to produce more black chartered accountants. That project was launched in Umtata by Madiba in 2021. Today, that project has produced more than 2,000 qualified black chartered accountants. Over 50% is women. It's that kind of focus when we are talking about education. And education doesn't mean we focus mainly on the classroom. Even the nation, currently, you will find that there's lack of patriotism. There's lack of culture of ownership. Everybody just do what he or she thinks is right. There's no discipline.
Mm-hmm. General, I want to get to many points as possible because I'm mindful of time. You know, in our introduction, you talked about South Africa being in a crisis. This is an important year for South Africa, 30 years into democracy. You spoke about lawlessness. Just talk to us about what this means, particularly as you reference the disconnect between South Africans and the current government. I mean, if you, given the fact that there is not going to be an outright winner, if you then come into power with several other parties, I would imagine, what would you change?
Well, lawlessness is caused mainly by people who are not servicing the people when they need to. That's why you have service protests, service delivery protests. Sometimes people are genuinely calling for assistance. Then the next thing, the government doesn't send the relevant departments to go and listen to that. They will send Begitele and his police and start tear gassing those people. So this disconnect is there for everybody to see. this government has failed to service the people. They would promise people. You see, another thing which is misleading. They always come up with a 3-year budget system. But midstream, second year, they change and say, no, we're taking the money for another crisis. And most of the projects, if you notice, they are never finished. And people at the end will say, but you promised to bring us water. Now you'll improve roads for us. What happened? Then the contractors will say, well, the government says there's no money. So the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you put your administration, and they must know what they are doing, and never lie to the people of South Africa and come up with empty promises. You rather say, this is the money we have, these are the priorities, we have heard you that you want A, B, C, D, E, but according to our estimate, it cannot fit within this financial year. Talk to the people.
Finally, as we wrap out or begin to wrap up our conversation, I want to understand your position as it relates to foreign policy. I mean, we've seen over the past years a number of shifts, both in the continent and, of course, internationally. You talk about needing to see a dispensation that views foreign policy through the lens of national interest. Talk to me a little bit about that, and where do you think we went wrong?
Currently, we have embassies all over the show. And some of the countries we are having diplomatic ties with are not producing anything. They are not helpful to us, either in education, military, economy. So what's the point of wanting to have embassy all over the world? That's another thing which we would have to analyze. Also, when you say you are going to deploy your troops, why must we be looking like we are a Father Christmas? Whenever there is a problem, South Africa goes there. And what are our own national interest in return? Because we send these troops there, and then the next thing, some of the big countries in the West, they are the ones who are doing better deals with those governments. So it's high time that we review everything related to the foreign policy. But Madiba left us with legacy when it comes to that. Where there is conflict, we must avoid to take sides. Rather bring the two factions together. In that way, we will retain the dignity of South Africa.
General, I know it's a hard ask, but 30 seconds, just one last word from you, just convincing those who may want to vote for you come the 29th of May, those that are saying, for instance, that you are trying very hard to cement your relevance and that you're fast approaching, just dwindling, from the political space.
There's no way that that word dwindling is not in the vocabulary of the majority citizens of South Africa, especially after I've been vindicated. It is the UDM which has been standing alone on issues like PIC, where the government and their friends were looting the state resources. We even currently tomorrow are waiting for a judgment. It was the UDM which wrote to the Joint Standing Committee on Defense to say, let's call Mapisa Ngagula, the Minister of Defense then, because there are serious allegations against him. I'm happy now that at least after she said, if Holomisa has got anything to say, she must go to the police. And I carried her instruction. Tomorrow, she doesn't want to go to court. That's UDM. So people will remember those. Consistency is the word. Hammer it in everybody's head.
UDM stands for consistency. Very quickly, you're not going to go back on that word in terms of what is transpiring tomorrow, as you say, as it relates to the speaker. So judgment?
The judgment, if the judgment is obvious, that the courts can never interfere with the work of the National Prosecuting Authority. If the NPA says there is a prima facie evidence which has led us to call for this person to go to court, it has to be like that. No shortcut.
General, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for that and throwing that last minute, spanner in the works there in this interview. Thank you so much for that. Of course, General Bantu Holomisa, the leader of the United Democratic Movement, as we continue right here on the channel to unpack various parties' manifestos as we head to those crucial elections.